So today I want to share some bits of my toolkit for how to fight anti-Semitism. And to fight anti-Semitism, we first need to fully understand it. What most Americans are told, and at least what most Americans believe about anti-Semitism, is usually either completely wrong or misses a big part of the picture. But the reality is that anti-Semitism comes in many forms. And we need everyone, not just us, everyone to understand these forms. So there are a bunch of types of anti-Semitism that most people are at least aware of. There's traditional religious anti-Semitism, which stems from the historic religious belief and stereotype about Jews. That's the basis of anti-Semitism across Europe for centuries. It's what drove the murder and expulsion of Jews from basically every single European country. It's what drove the murder of Jews during the Crusades. It's what sparked the label of Jews as Christ killers. There's racial anti-Semitism, which came about really in the 19th century based on the pseudo-scientific idea that Jews are a distinct race. With that came more derogatory stereotypes, combined with the old idea that Jews posed a threat, this time to the purity of other races. This formed a large part of the ideology that underpinned the Holocaust. There's political anti-Semitism, where Jews are blamed for societal problems, economic challenges, political unrest. Political anti-Semitism really explodes into an almost endless list of more stereotypes and conspiracy theories, with Jews being labeled as wealthy, greedy, power-hungry. Based on these tropes, we control banking, governments, entertainment, the weather. That was true. We're really not very good at it. My bank account needs a few more zeros before I believe that one. Then there's types of anti-Semitism that really aren't as black and white, but are just as dangerous. There's Holocaust denial, in which the Holocaust is downplayed or completely denied. There's online and digital anti-Semitism, with the internet and particularly social media becoming a breeding ground for anti-Semitism of all kinds. Then there's what I call casual anti-Semitism. That's often unintentional. This is when anti-Semitism has become part of our culture to the point where people don't even realize they're being anti-Semitic. But then there are also forms of anti-Semitism that are completely ignored. There's Islamic anti-Semitism and Arab anti-Semitism, which we see not only in Israel and the Middle East, but in Europe and the United States. There's black anti-Semitism, often relating to radical black Hebrew Israelites and the idea that they're the real Jews. I find that funny sometimes when they find out what being a Jew actually involves, they might change their mind. And then there's what Chief Rabbi Sacks called contemporary anti-Semitism, in the form of anti-Israel and anti-Zionist anti-Semitism. This is where even the existence of Israel, the world's only Jewish nation, is delegitimized as an apartheid fascist state, with all Jews responsible for the actions of its government, real or imaginary. And it's important to say, I think, for the millionth time, that criticizing Israel, or even being anti-Israel in some ways, doesn't mean that you're necessarily anti-Semitic. Not everyone who is in some way anti-Israel is anti-Semitic, but everyone who is anti-Semitic is anti-Israel. And it's usually really pretty incredibly easy to tell someone apart if they're just criticizing Israel or using Israel as a way to hide their hatred of Jews. If they can't stop criticizing Israel for being an apartheid state, or supposedly abusing human rights, or even the fact that Israel labels itself as a Jewish country, but they're weirdly quiet about every single Muslim nation on the planet, or other dictatorships like China, which are keeping millions of Uyghur Muslims in concentration camps right now, then it's a decent bet you found an anti-Semite. But the problem right now is that most efforts to call out anti-Semitism we see, at least in the mainstream, especially from non-Jews and a lot of secular Jews, are usually focused on the forms of anti-Semitism that help them out politically. Democrats will talk endlessly about white supremacist anti-Semitism and then immediately post a selfie with Al Sharpton. But if you're a victim of the inevitable violence that grows like a cancer from all forms of anti-Semitism, does it really matter what kind of anti-Semitism you faced? Does it matter that the victims of the Pittsburgh synagogue shooting were attacked by a white supremacist any more than the radical black Hebrew Israelites who murdered Jews in New York and New Jersey, or radical Muslims who murdered Jews in Europe? No, of course it doesn't. All forms of anti-Semitism are evil, and all forms need to be rejected. That needs to be our starting point for fighting anti-Semitism. We can't fight anti-Semitism until we get people to wake up to the fact that anti-Semitism isn't just Nazis in World War II, or white supremacists walking around with tiki torches screaming, "Jews will not replace us."